The phone rings during a quiet evening, and Rowan Hale drops the spoon from her hand when she hears her estranged mother's voice for the first time in 5 years. The sound pierces the stillness of her kitchen, and for a moment Rowan forgets how to breathe. The familiar yet foreign voice crackles through the line, tender in tone, but heavy with unspoken history. Memories rush back, nights of slammed doors, silences that lasted for months, and the final ultimatum that had torn the family apart. She had built an entire life in the absence of this voice, and yet, in an instant, she is 16 again, waiting for approval that never came. Her mother speaks as though nothing happened, as though 5 years of exile had been a brief pause. "Sweetheart, how are you?" she says lightly, as though they had spoken just yesterday. Rowan's chest tightens. She remembers her father's voice, 5 years earlier, telling her to choose between her sister or her savings. That demand had cost her everything: her place at the family table, her parents' affection, her sense of belonging. Now, suddenly, her mother calls as though time had never passed. Rowan senses the truth immediately. This is not reconciliation, it is a summons. The call arrives at the very moment Rowan has begun to find peace. Her home, a small craftsman on the edge of Greybridge, has become her sanctuary. Every wall painted by her own hand, every garden bed a testament to her resilience. She has risen in her career, advising clients on the very boundaries that once cost her her family. And yet, even as she stands on her hardwood floor with the phone pressed to her ear, she feels the ground shift beneath her. The chapter's goal is clear. The past has returned, and with it, the dangerous possibility of betrayal renewed. Outside, the late summer air carries the sound of cicadas, a hum that should soothe but instead unsettles. Inside, the kitchen smells of tomato sauce simmering on the stove. Rowan grips the counter as her mother extends the invitation. "We want you to come to dinner this Friday. Your father will be there. Seraphine, too. It has been too long since we have been together as a family." The words sound innocent, but Rowan knows her parents too well. Family dinners had always been theaters of favoritism, with Seraphine Vale receiving the spotlight, while Rowan lingered in the shadows. She stares at the row of photographs on her mantel pictures of friends and neighbors who have become her true family. Mrs. Pennington next door, who taught her the art of tomato gardening. Miguel Cortez, the colleague who always checked on her when late nights stretched too long. Lila Park, who brought wine and laughter on her loneliest birthdays. These people, not her blood relatives, had filled her hollow holidays. And yet, the voice on the other end of the line awakens an old ache, a child's yearning to be wanted by those who once cast her aside. Rowan's hand trembles as she agrees to attend, her own voice sounding foreign. When she hangs up, silence floods the kitchen, thicker than before. She sinks to the floor, her back pressed to the cabinets, pasta forgotten on the stove. Her mind is a storm of conflicting emotions: hope, fear, suspicion, and a longing she hates to admit. The days that follow are filled with unease. At work, she cannot focus, replaying the conversation in her head. She meets with Dr. Mara Lynn, who listens carefully as Rowan unravels the invitation. "What do you hope for from this dinner?" Dr. Lynn asks gently. Rowan whispers her best-case dream: an apology, recognition, a new beginning. But then she admits the darker truth: her family does not reach out without reason. "They want something," she says bitterly. Dr. Lynn nods, reminding her to guard her heart, to protect the independence she fought for. Rowan scribbles notes on a yellow pad. "Do not discuss money. Do not apologize for the past. Leave if manipulation begins." Friday draws closer, and Rowan prepares herself with the same discipline she once used to pass exams and close business deals. She chooses a simple dress, professional but not ostentatious. She selects a bottle of wine not too costly, not too cheap an offering of civility without revealing success. The ordinary rituals only highlight the extraordinary weight of what is to come. As twilight settles on her neighborhood, Rowan steps onto her porch, watering the tomatoes Mrs. Pennington helped her plant. The soil is damp, the leaves green, a symbol of roots she chose for herself. She whispers to the quiet street, as if asking permission, as if bracing herself for battle. She cannot shake the unease that coils around her ribs. Why now? Why after so many years of silence? She knows with every fiber of her being that the answer is not love. The answer is a demand yet to be spoken. And as the last drop of water falls into the soil, Rowan knows she is walking into danger. She hangs up the phone, whispering to herself, "What do they really want from me now?" Rowan steps into her childhood home and is met not with warmth, but with the overgrown yard, peeling paint, and her father's unreadable stare. The sight unsettles her. Once, this house had been a stage for polished appearances, freshly painted shutters, manicured flower beds, and the scent of roast chicken drifting onto the porch. Now the lawn is wild, and the house itself seems to sag beneath years of neglect. It is as though time itself has betrayed the place that once betrayed her. She remembers nights when Seraphine stood on this very porch, bathed in praise after a recital, while Rowan carried costumes and bags inside unnoticed. Those memories echo in the silence as she crosses the threshold. Rowan tells herself she came for answers, not reconciliation. She wants to see with her own eyes what lies beneath the sudden invitation. And as she steps inside, she knows the goal of this visit is no warm embrace. It is a trial, a test to see what more they can take. The air smells faintly of mildew, mixed with something burnt, as though her mother had tried to cover decay with too much perfume. The dining room, once adorned with silver candlesticks and velvet drapes, looks hollow. Chipped dishes sit on a table that no longer gleams. The walls, stripped of artwork, display mismatched photographs in discount frames. Where family heirlooms once testified to stability, now gaps and pale rectangles tell the story of items sold for survival. Her father greets her with restraint, his expression neither kind nor cruel, just unreadable, like a judge withholding a verdict. Her mother sweeps in from the kitchen, her perfume overwhelming, her smile too bright. She clutches Rowan's arms with rehearsed affection, telling her she looks too serious, the same refrain Rowan had heard as a child when told she should smile more, laugh more, ask for less. They seat her at the table, and the performance begins. Polite questions flow with unsettling precision. Where do you live now? How is your career? Have you been promoted? Buying a home in this economy must be hard. Each query grazes the surface of her finances, as though their hunger lies just beneath their words. Rowan answers carefully, truthfully, but without detail, as if each sentence must pass through a filter of self-preservation. She mentions her promotion but not her salary, admits to home ownership but not the value of the property. The evening grows taut with restraint, until the front door bursts open. Seraphine Vale storms in, late as always, her entrance a carefully orchestrated spectacle. Her designer dress shimmers under the dim lights, her diamond studs catching every flicker. Her perfume fills the room as she embraces Rowan dramatically, declaring how much she has missed her. To anyone else, it would look like sisterly devotion. To Rowan, it feels like theater performed for an audience of two aging parents. The contrast is startling, her sister radiant in luxury, while the home around them crumbles. Rowan sees it instantly. Her parents have sacrificed their comfort to maintain Seraphine's illusion of success. The missing heirlooms, the downgraded furniture, the peeling paint-all signs that Seraphine's glow has come at their expense. Dinner begins, a roast chicken small and dry, vegetables overcooked, nothing like the feasts Rowan remembered from childhood holidays. Conversation spirals as Seraphine takes control, describing her glamorous projects, name-dropping contacts, painting a portrait of an artistic life that sounds dazzling until the cracks appear. With every glass of wine, her stories shift. She speaks of cash flow problems, then of difficult investors, until finally the truth spills out. The boutique she opened in Graybridge is drowning. Her father clears his throat. Your sister has had some cash flow issues recently. His understatement feels like a hammer blow. Seraphine interrupts with bitter laughter. Cash flow issues? Try financial nightmare. Her voice trembles as she describes the renovations, the unpaid vendors, the landlord's threats, and a business partner who vanished with funds. Rowan listens in silence, her stomach tightening. How bad is it? She asks, though she dreads the answer. The number falls heavy into the air, $260,000. For a moment, Rowan cannot move. The figure feels absurd, like a grotesque exaggeration, until Seraphine begins listing credit cards, loans, and personal expenses dressed as investments in her brand. Rowan sees her parents exchange glances across the table, as if waiting for the cue to reveal the real purpose of this reunion. It has never been about reconciliation. It has always been about the house, the career, the security Rowan built while they abandoned her. Her glass trembles in her hand as she forces herself to meet her father's gaze. His eyes are sharp, calculating. We know you bought a house, he says quietly. The words are not a question, but a declaration, a judgment. Rowan nearly drops her fork, the truth laid bare. They have not invited her home to welcome her back. They have summoned her to put her home on the table like an offering, a solution to the disaster they created. Her father leans forward, eyes steady, voice deliberate. We know you bought a house. Isn't it time you helped your sister? You could sell your house, her mother suggests sweetly, and save Seraphine. Rowan grips her glass, pulse hammering. The words hang in the air like a ghost from the past. 5 years earlier, they had demanded her savings. Now they circle back to the same place, only the stakes are higher, the demand larger. The echo of that ultimatum still bruises her heart, and she realizes in that instant that nothing has changed. Time has not healed. It has only sharpened the family's hunger. Rowan forces her expression to remain calm, though inside she feels the familiar surge of betrayal. She had hoped for civility, perhaps even the possibility of forgiveness, but the real goal of this dinner is now painfully clear. This chapter belongs to her refusal, to the unmasking of her family's manipulation, and to the moment she finally finds her voice strong enough to stand against them. The dining room feels smaller now, as though the walls lean in with judgment. The roast chicken has gone cold. Half-drained glasses of wine reflect the flickering candlelight, casting distorted shadows across the chipped table. Rowan notices how the chairs bear scratches, the same chairs where she once sat silently as her sister's triumphs were toasted while her own efforts were dismissed. Tonight is no different. The table is merely a stage for Seraphine's drama. Her mother leans forward, eyes brimming with feigned compassion. Nobody is asking you to be homeless, dear. You could sell the house, buy a modest condo, and still have plenty left. Think of how much you could help your sister. Rowan shakes her head slowly, her voice steady though her hands tremble under the table. You are asking me to give up the one place I built on my own. My house is not a bank account for Seraphine's debts. Seraphine slams her fork against the plate, eyes flashing. You have always been jealous of me. This holier-than-thou routine, pretending to be responsible while looking down on everyone. Admit it, you like watching me fail. The accusation slices deeper than Rowan expects. Jealousy? No, what she feels is exhaustion, the weight of decades spent cleaning up the emotional mess her parents refused to confront. She draws in a breath. Jealous? Seraphine, I worked for everything I have while you were handed opportunity after opportunity. I never asked for a single penny. Even now, after 5 years of silence, You don't care how I am. You just want what I've built." Her father's voice rises, heavy with judgment. "Family helps family. We sacrificed for you, too. We put a roof over your head, food on the table." Rowan's laugh is bitter, hollow. "You did the minimum required. Beyond that, all of your sacrifices went to Seraphine her schools, her galleries, her boutiques. You left me to work part-time jobs to fund my education, to climb on my own. And now you come to me again, demanding I undo her mistakes." The room quakes with tension. Her mother's tears spill, a performance Rowan knows too well. How can you be so cruel? Your sister is drowning, and you could save her with a single decision. Rowan pushes back her chair and rises, her shadow stretching across the table. "Number. I will not sell my house. I will not take loans against it. I will not pay Seraphine's debts. Her choices are not my responsibility." The climax shatters whatever illusion of reconciliation lingered. Her mother sobs openly. Her father's face flushes with rage. Seraphine glares, her expression hardening into hatred so sharp it chills Rowan to her core. "You think you're better than us?" Seraphine spits. "One day you'll regret this. One day you'll come begging for help, and we'll remember." Rowan steadies herself, though her heart races. She remembers Dr. Mara Lynn's words, "Protect your boundaries. Leave if it becomes manipulative." It has, and she will. She gathers her purse, her movements deliberate, her silence heavier than any shouted argument. Her father rises too, his voice low but laced with venom. "If you walk out that door again, do not expect another invitation." Rowan pauses, her hand resting on the frame of the doorway. She turns her head just enough for her words to carry back into the room. "I've heard that before." Rowan woke on Saturday morning to the sound of her doorbell ringing, and when she peered through the peephole, she saw her parents standing on her porch with uneasy smiles. For 3 days, silence had followed the dinner confrontation, but it had not been a silence of peace. Rowan had sensed something stirring beneath it, a storm gathering just beyond sight. She had told herself they would not come here, that even her parents had enough restraint to leave her sanctuary untouched. Yet here they were, pressed against the very door they had sought to strip from her life. She opened the door slowly, every nerve braced. The smell of her mother's perfume slipped in first, cloying and familiar. Her father's eyes swept past her, scanning the interior before she had even invited them inside. They asked politely if they might come in. Their voices softened, and though Rowan's better judgment screamed no, she stepped aside, unwilling to ignite conflict on her doorstep with neighbors watching from across the street. Her living room, so carefully curated, became a stage for their inspection. They offered compliments about the decor, about how lovely she had made the house, but Rowan felt their eyes measuring, evaluating. She led them through the rooms as a polite hostess, but with each step, she noticed the way her father lingered near file boxes in the office closet, the way her mother's gaze paused on the keys hanging by the back door. They were not admiring. They were calculating. Rowan reminded herself of her therapist's warning. If they cannot take through guilt, they will try through another means. Her mother's sudden warmth, her father's softened tone. It was all performance, a mask worn to disguise intent. They asked after her career, her garden, even her friends. The conversation danced around ordinary family talk, but Rowan heard what was missing. Not once did they acknowledge the pain of their silence, nor apologize for casting her out. It was all surface, no substance. At last, her father cleared his throat, and the real purpose slipped into the open. "We've been thinking," he said carefully, "about options that might help everyone." Rowan's heart stiffened. She knew the word options was only another way of saying your sacrifice. Her mother smiled, that same smile she had worn when convincing Rowan to hand over toys to Seraphine as a child. "Perhaps you could take a home equity loan," she said brightly. "That way you keep your house but still help your sister." The suggestion landed like a blow. A loan in Rowan's name, debt chained to her back, funds handed over to a sister who had squandered every advantage. They framed it as compromise, but Rowan saw it for what it was, another attempt to siphon what she had built. Her voice steadied with effort. Number: I will not take a loan on my house. I will not risk my security for Seraphine's spending. The mask slipped at once. Her mother's face hardened. Her father's jaw tightened. So you are determined to let us suffer, her mother hissed, no longer pretending. After everything we've done for you. Rowan gestured toward the door. I think you should leave. The tension in the room snapped like a wire. For a moment, she feared they might resist, that her father might press further into her space. But to her surprise, they complied. Her father even nodded stiffly, murmuring, "We will be in touch." Their exit was too easy, their composure too controlled, and as Rowan watched them retreat down the porch steps, her stomach twisted. This was not defeat, it was reconnaissance. When the door closed, she locked every bolt, her breath uneven. She checked the office, the keys, the closets. Every detail of their attention replayed in her mind. Her mother's eyes on the key hook, her father's hand brushing the file boxes. They had not come to reconcile, nor even to negotiate. They had come to survey, to map out her defenses. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay in bed listening to the creak of her own house, each sound magnified into a warning. She had built this home as her sanctuary, brick by brick, but the visit had cracked that sense of safety. She rose in the dark hours before dawn, checked her doors again, then stood at the window watching the quiet street. The roses in her neighbor Mrs. Pennington's yard glowed faintly under the porch light, symbols of the normal life she longed for. But Rowan knew peace had slipped beyond reach. Her parents had left too easily. They had walked away, but not in surrender, only in silence that promised something worse. Her instincts whispered with chilling certainty, this was not the end of their campaign, only a change in strategy. 3 days after her parents' visit, Rowan returned home from work to find her front door slightly ajar, the lock splintered. For an instant she stood frozen on the porch, the evening air pressing cold against her skin. She thought of all the little signs she had noticed during their visit, the way her mother's eyes lingered on the spare keys, the way her father examined the file boxes. She had known something was coming. Yet seeing her sanctuary violated shook her to the core. She pressed her phone to her ear, whispering to the dispatcher as she described her address and the sound of voices inside. "Stay outside," the operator instructed firmly. But when she heard a crash followed by her mother's voice, sharp, commanding, Rowan felt a surge of rage overcome her fear. This was her home, her refuge. She pushed the door open. The scene that greeted her was devastation. Books ripped from shelves, furniture overturned, couch cushions slashed. Across the living room wall, written in lipstick, a single word screamed back at her: selfish. Her father stood by the desk drawers, rifling through them with cold efficiency. Her mother emerged from the hallway, her expression startled, but not ashamed, and then Seraphine stepped from Rowan's bedroom, clutching papers in her hand with triumphant glee. "Found the mortgage documents," she announced, until her eyes landed on Rowan in the doorway. Rowan's voice tore from her throat. "What are you doing?" Her father turned, his expression disturbingly calm. "Adathis is for your own good, for the family." "My own good?" Rowan's hands shook, but her voice grew sharper. "You broke into my house and destroyed everything I've built." Her mother waved her hand dismissively, as though the wreckage around them were nothing. "Things can be replaced. Family cannot." Seraphine's lip curled into a sneer. "You care more about furniture than your own sister. 260,000 is nothing to you when you have this house." The sirens in the distance grew louder. Rowan's phone was still open in her hand, the dispatcher silent but listening. She lifted it. "The police are on their way. You need to leave." Her father laughed, low and bitter. "The police? You'd call them on your own parents? They won't do anything. We are family. You have no right to be here, Rowan said, her voice steadier than her racing pulse. You broke in. You destroyed my home. And now you are stealing documents. This is not family, it is crime. Her mother's eyes burned with venom. We made you. Everything you have exists because of us. You owe us. The words stung, but they also clarified. For years she had carried guilt, believing she was somehow ungrateful for refusing to bankroll her sister. But here, in the wreckage of her living room, she saw the truth with painful clarity. What they called love had always been control. What they called sacrifice had always been theft dressed in devotion. Blue lights flashed outside, and panic finally registered on their faces. Rowan stood her ground as her father grabbed for the papers in Seraphine's hands. We need to go, he urged. Number. Rowan's body blocked the doorway. You stay here and explain to the officers what you were doing. Her father's voice dropped to a threat. Move, Rowan. Or what? She said, her chin lifting. You'll add assault to your list of crimes? The pounding at the door was followed by a firm voice. Police! Open up! 2 officers entered swiftly, their eyes sweeping across the chaos. The female officer fixed on Seraphine, who still clutched the mortgage documents. Did she plant those too? She asked with cool sarcasm. Rowan's statement poured out steady, as if rehearsed in the darkest corners of her mind. Years of estrangement, demands for money, suspicious visits, and now this breaking and entering, destruction, attempted theft. Her family tried to dismiss it as a misunderstanding, but the lipstick on the wall, the overturned furniture, the documents in hand, these were louder than excuses. Outside, neighbors gathered. Mrs. Pennington stood on her lawn, arms crossed in silent solidarity. Mr. Klein filmed with his phone, capturing her parents and sister being led to patrol cars. The shame of public exposure settled over them like a cloak, but still her mother screamed, Family helps family. You cannot do this. Rowan's throat tightened, but she spoke with finality. This is not help. This is abuse, and it stops today. As the squad cars pulled away, the flashing lights fading into the night, Rowan stood in the ruins of her sanctuary. The adrenaline drained from her body, leaving her trembling. Mrs. Pennington crossed the lawn and placed a steady arm around her shoulders. You'll come stay with me tonight, dear, she said firmly. Rowan looked back at the wreckage, her books scattered, her sofa gutted, her wall defaced, and felt the weight of what had shattered. The family she had yearned for would never return. What remained was her strength, and the neighbors who had proven themselves more loyal than blood. But as she locked the door behind her, one truth burned in her chest. This battle with her family was not over. In the days following the break-in, Rowan sifted through the wreckage of her home and discovered a forgotten envelope behind her desk, containing a certificate that declared her house a protected historical property. She sat on the floor, the document trembling in her hands. The ornate seal of the Heritage Conservancy glimmered faintly in the morning light, the language precise. Alterations and sales could not proceed without approval. What she once thought of as a charming detail was in truth a safeguard her parents and sister had not anticipated. The very walls of her home were defended by history itself. The realization spread through her like warmth after a bitter storm. For years, she had carried guilt that her refusal to give was selfishness, but now she saw that her choice to protect her house was not only rightful, it was shielded by law. The chapter's heart was here justice and protection emerging from hidden places, where loyalty to herself was vindicated. She brought the certificate to the office of Ava Calder, a sharp-eyed attorney who specialized in real estate and family disputes. Ava read through the papers, then leaned back in her chair. They weren't just trespassing, Rowan. They were preparing fraud. This designation makes any attempt to sell without you impossible. You've got a case strong enough for restraining orders and civil damages. Rowan exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. I want it all documented. Every call, every message, every broken piece of furniture. Ava nodded, already drafting the filings. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale coffee when the hearings began. Her parents looked smaller under fluorescent lights, their confident postures replaced with nervous shifting. Seraphine's defiance cracked when questioned. She wept openly, confessing debts far less grand than she had claimed, revealing the hollow vanity of her boutique. Rowan listened, not with cruelty, but with weary recognition this was the pattern, collapsing under its own weight once the illusion ended. When the judge granted the restraining order, Rowan felt a quiet tide rise within her. No more midnight calls, no more social media slander, no more sudden appearances on her porch. For the first time, boundaries were written, not just in her heart but in law. The criminal case, though softened to probation and community service, still marked her family with consequences, and the civil settlement provided funds enough to repair her home and install a security system that blinked reassuring red each night. Yet justice alone did not mend her heart. Nights remained restless, each creak of the house stirring fears of intrusion. It was her neighbors who carried her through. Mrs. Pennington appeared with casseroles and stories of her late husband, offering presents when Rowan could not find sleep. Mr. Klein wired new lights around the property, insisting she deserved safety. Friends visited with laughter, filling the hollow spaces left by betrayal. The everyday gestures of community stitched Rowan together more surely than any court ruling. Months passed. The roses in her garden bloomed again. The hateful word on her wall painted over with calm colors, the scars of damage softened by care. She sat on her porch one evening as fireflies lit the twilight, reflecting on how far she had come. Family had always been described to her as blood and obligation. Now she knew it was something else: respect, protection, mutual care. She had found it not in the people who demanded everything, but in those who gave without conditions. Then came the letter. Delivered through her lawyer as required by the court, it bore Seraphine's handwriting. Rowan hesitated before opening it, fearing more venom. But inside was something different. "I am sorry for what we did," it read. "I am beginning to understand the damage I've caused. I do not expect forgiveness, but I am trying to take responsibility for the first time." Rowan closed the letter slowly, her chest aching with a complicated mix of relief and doubt. Words could not erase years of wounds, nor undo the night her sanctuary was torn apart. Yet they marked a beginning, perhaps not of reconciliation, but of accountability. She placed the letter in a drawer, deciding to wait and see if actions would follow. On her porch, the evening air soft around her, Rowan lifted her eyes to the stars. The house behind her house stood firm, a testament to her resilience. What her family had tried to seize had instead revealed hidden protections, both legal and personal. They had tried to reduce her to dependence, but she had found freedom in boundaries. And as she sat there, she whispered a truth she now fully believed. Sometimes the family we choose, the ones who bring bread to our doors and laughter to our tables, are the only family we need. In the end, Rowan's journey reminds us that family can be the deepest source of love, but also the sharpest blade of betrayal. She learned that loyalty cannot be forced, nor should it be blind when it becomes a weapon against one's own well-being. Her parents and sister believed that blood gave them endless rights to her sacrifices, but life proved otherwise. Justice stepped in when manipulation failed, and the law drew boundaries that love should have drawn long ago. The image of her torn living room, the word selfish smeared across her wall, will never fully fade from memory. Yet in its place came something stronger, a renewed sense of identity, and the knowledge that her sanctuary was worth protecting at all costs. True family, Rowan discovered, is not defined by shared names or old photographs, but by those who bring peace to your doorstep and stand by you without condition. Neighbors who cooked for her in silence, friends who showed up in court to support her, colleagues who filled her with courage. These became the ties that outshone blood. Seraphine's apology, timid and uncertain, showed a flicker of change, but Rowan knew healing could only come with proof, not words alone. She had learned that trust once shattered must be earned carefully, and forgiveness cannot erase accountability. Her story echoes across many homes where siblings are favored, where parents choose one child at the expense of another, and where silence covers wounds too long. But silence cannot erase the truth, and betrayal will eventually collapse under its own weight. In Rowan's case, hidden legal protections stood guard when loyalty failed. In another, it may be the strength of one's convictions or the solidarity of chosen friends. What matters most is that courage carries the betrayed further than guilt ever could. Rowan's stand reminds us that sometimes saying no is the greatest act of love for oneself, love for justice, and love for a future built without chains. Her home remains not just a building of wood and glass, but a symbol of her endurance. She did not surrender to guilt, nor did she bow to threats. She claimed her right to live free. And so, the lesson lingers. Betrayal may break trust, but it cannot break the spirit of one who chooses truth. Justice may not always look like vengeance, but it does bring balance when boundaries are honored. Loyalty is not measured by sacrifice alone, but by respect and reciprocity. And true family is not always given, it is often chosen, forged in kindness, proven in action. The philosophy remains: family should lift you higher, not weigh you down. If this story has touched your heart, if you have ever faced betrayal or found redemption in unexpected places, I invite you to share your thoughts. Leave the words number 1 in the comments if you felt Rowan's courage echo in your own life. And do not forget subscribe to our channel to hear the next story of betrayal, hidden secrets, and justice found where it is least expected. Because every story carries a warning, and every warning carries a light for those who are still searching for the meaning of family. Loyalty is measured not by words but by actions. And the greatest revenge against cruelty is to live in a family remade by respect. If you felt the weight of Rowan's struggle and the triumph of her voice, I invite you to leave the words number 1 in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe to our channel, where more stories of hidden secrets, betrayal, justice, and redemption awaits, stories that remind us what family should truly mean and what it must never become.